Goal Getting Podcast, episode 21.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook and 30-day free trial at www.goalgettingbook.com. Over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Hello, goal getters. Do you have these negative limiting beliefs that keep you from getting the goals you set? Well, let's listen to the Goal Getting Podcast and turn them into positive, success-seeking beliefs and thoughts. Change your subconscious mind and get the goals you're set. This is Tony Woodall with the Goal Getting Podcast, and we're going to show you how. You can succeed. Hello, goal getters. Welcome to the Goal Getting Podcast. Glad to have you back again for another show. Today's show, we have a great guest, Joel Boggess, the host of ReLaunch. The ReLaunch show is one of Joel's podcasts, and he has got that podcast rocking and rolling. They have done some phenomenal work. Joel and his wife, Dr. Pei, have a great show that you should listen to on their podcast. And Joel is actually a good friend, and he's now also a mentor of mine. I am working with him on some projects and love working with Joel. He and Pei are very good, which you'll find out on this podcast. So I'm going to quit talking, and we're going to go ahead and let you listen to Joel Boggess from the ReLaunch show. Good morning, goal getters, and good day or afternoon, wherever you're from. This is Tony Woodall, your host with Goal Getting Podcast, and I appreciate you showing up and listening to us today. My guest today is Joel Boggess, and Joel is the host of the ReLaunch show and the author of the #1 best-selling book, Finding Your Voice. Joel is passionate about sharing fresh ideas, success tips, and inspirations through real-life stories. He is a natural with broadcasting, and he enjoys teaching podcast and radio show hosts on how to book great guests and having engaging interviews. Joel's vision and goal by 2017 is to have helped 200,000 listeners to learn to believe themselves again. And I've become good friends with Joel, and he's also a mentor to me in the podcast world. And I would like to welcome Joel to the show. How you doing, Joel?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. This is actually an honor for me to be on your show because, I remember, gosh, it seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't really that long ago when you had called us on an open Q&A call. And, you know what? Pei and I, Dr. Pei, my wife of 14 years, we just kind of called you out. And we really put some challenges, laid down some challenges on you. And you know what, Tony? You have met and passed those challenges, and you put together this wonderful podcast that serves as a great resource to help people not only set goals, but to get goals, because it's all about the achieving. So congratulations on the show. Again, an honor to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Joel. And yeah, that is definitely something I want to point out. You have been a big inspiration and a help to me. You and Dr. Pei at that call did call me out, and it was quite shocking. I had called to ask, some advice and talk about, some of my issues I had with getting my podcast started. And you nailed it right on the head when you asked me, or didn't actually ask me. You told me that, is that the imposter I hear talking, and almost brought me to tears, to be honest with you, because that was something that I was struggling with, the imposter syndrome. And I know that that's common with people trying to, set and achieve goals, is, that imposter syndrome can come out there and just totally derail you. And, that's, again, part of the Goal Getting Podcast, is to help people understand those limiting or negative beliefs that we may have in our minds, and, help us change that thinking to, success-oriented thinking. And you nailed it right on the head that day. And, when you did, like I said, it almost brought me to tears, and it really set me on the right path. Your advice to kick them to the curb and kick them out of the house and get going did it, and I started shortly thereafter. And I thank you and Dr. Pei for that call out. Sometimes we have to be called out on that type of thing when when somebody, that's a good expert can figure that out, and shows us. So I do appreciate that.
Well, you're very welcome, Tony. And when I'm talking and working with podcasters and content creators, talking about kicking out the imposter and talking about values like personal accountability and results only and no excuses. And we can get into that later if you want to. Now, a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but sometimes I might come across as a hard ass. And, I'm not. I'm actually a pretty nice guy, but a lot of times I come across strongly like that, not because I'm trying to show you or teach you something, but you know what, Tony? I'm preaching to myself because I have to be reminded that, the imposter no longer lives here like he lived in my house for a long time. And, sometimes I want to just get busy doing stuff and not really focusing on results. So I know you hear that come from me a lot, and you're a member of my elite program. So I appreciate you being there for that. So you hear a lot of the results only, no excuses language, but a lot of that is me preaching to myself because I need a reminder, just like we all do.
Right. And I think a lot of people do need that. I for one, like that type of bedside manner, if you want to call it that. Some of my favorite doctors that I've had have been very blunt with me. And sometimes you need that. I had a doctor once, I went in for a bad knee. I had sore knees, and the doctor said, well, fat people don't usually have that problem. And I go, huh? I was grossly overweight at the time and trying to play tennis, and my knee was hurting. And, he said, fat people don't usually have that problem. And, you don't expect that from your doctor, but it really hit home with me and got me realizing I need to do something about this. And, even though I, have great success plans and goal achievement plans, that I go by and follow, sometimes we need a little kick in the tail to be able to get that. So, some of my favorite doctors have been, that kind of bedside manner, and, they've worked very well with me. So I think I'm in the right camp here. So I definitely appreciate that.
Cool.
So tell me about your podcast, because your podcast is about helping people and talking about relaunching. And, that's something I've done in my career. This is actually my second go at a podcast. I'd started one back in 2004 and 5 and didn't go anywhere with that one. At the time, it wasn't a goal. But, you help a lot of people with your show, and that, I think, is your intent, is to help people, believe in themselves again. And so tell us a little bit about your show and what it is and how it works.
Yeah, wow. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about ReLaunch, because that is one of my favorite things to talk about. But before I get there, let me kind of give a little bit of background. Is that okay?
Okay, absolutely, please.
Oh, fantastic. I spent the lion's share of the 90s behind the microphone in traditional radio, also in front of the camera as a reporter, and a little bit of time as an associate producer. And while I left that industry in the late 90s and did a couple things between then and between now, Tony, when the opportunity came for me to go from broadcasting to podcasting, I knew that I needed to not only be in that industry, in the podcasting, the content creation industry, but I knew that I needed to be a leader in that industry. And gosh, Dr. Pei, my wife of 14 years, and I we have spent considerable time and resources, learning from some of the best guys in the business to make our podcast rock, to make our book launches rock, and to be able to do things with the very best practices. And that's what we do. That's what we do in Elite. We try to make that available to people. That's what we try to talk about a little bit on the ReLaunch show. And that's just kind of how we roll, helping people get from point A to point B. And oftentimes in between those points, there is a relaunch. And it could be a relaunch that is of a personal nature. Gosh, we have Jack Canfield on the show a couple of weeks ago, or rather months ago. You might recognize that name. Your listeners probably do.
Yep.
Because they're familiar with the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And I asked Jack, I said, Jack, what was the toughest part of your life? What was the biggest challenge? And within 60 seconds of the show, 60 seconds to maybe a minute or two, he was talking about his divorce and how that was a significant personal and relational relaunch for him, and how that was a $25 million period in his life. And he jokes now. He said, you know what? My wife got a good lawyer and I got to keep my job. And he talks about his relaunch. There's been other people that we have on that talk about business relaunches. You know, maybe there was a business failure in their background, or maybe they were laid off from their corporate employer. And then they talk about how they were able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to kick themselves in the tail and to get moving with their own relaunch. The idea of the show, which I think is really what you're after, is that is absolutely 100% relatable for pretty much anyone, because we've all gone through a relaunch. And while some may have been personal, some may have been professional, some may have been emotional and spiritual, and they may have combined several of those different kinds at the same time, we've all been through it. And it provides inspirational stories and fresh ideas, and then also practical steps for people that are getting set up to go through their own relaunch.
Excellent. Yeah. And I've personally gone through one myself in the last 5 years, so I certainly understand that, and it has definite relevance to me, and that's why I listen to your show. And I do appreciate the guests that you have on there. They're very inspiring and help, and a lot of the listeners in our podcast have similar type episodes that they've gone through in their life, and are working on goals to achieve and overcome some of those if they've been negative. But just, even just relaunching a career or whatever, I know several that have, been working on that, and this is a good idea for them to do that, and maybe listen to your show and some of the guests that you have on there. And I do want to congratulate you on your show, by the way, the ReLaunch show. I understand you have 750,000 downloads, and you've been doing quite well. So
yeah,
congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. ReLaunch just celebrated, I say just, it was about 13 months ago now, the 1 year anniversary. And yeah, last time I checked, I think we're at about 750,000 plays, give or take. So yeah, we are excited about that. We're knocking on the front door of 1 million, which is crazy, but it looks like it's getting ready to happen here in a month or so. So we're excited about that, and we have big plans and big guests in store for upcoming episodes. So a lot of fun we're having with that. By the way, Tony, you may not have noticed this, but it's no big secret. Sometimes I forget to mention it, but ReLaunch is actually not our first show.
Really? Okay. I think I've heard that before. I think I've heard you've had others as well. And
actually, ReLaunch is my 9th show.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up on the Goal Getting podcast is because, it's all about consistent persistence. And that's what helped us get to where we are today. And yeah, we knocked it out of the park and continue to do so with the ReLaunch show. Thank God for that. But you know what? That wasn't always the case. There were many trips to the batter's box, and there were many practice swings that I had to really work on to get my show to really take off like a rocket. And when you're setting goals for yourself, the same principle applies.
Right.
We've always wanted to do spectacular with our show, me specifically. And we've always wanted to touch lives and to provide meaningful, very relevant content for people that are moving through their own life, and they're looking for the edge, the winner's edge. And it just took us, a little bit of practice before we were able to hone that in and then turn on the microphone and be able to deliver. It took a while.
Yep. And sometimes it does, and you just have to, like I said, have consistent persistence. I like that phrase. I'm going to borrow that from you.
Sure.
I like that. But yeah, that's really, you just have to keep going with it. And, as we talk about, on our podcast, is knowing your why you want to do something, and what's the reasoning for your goals. And I think that's a big part of that. And I'm sure you have your why for what you do. And, your podcast is a great tool. You do a lot of training for people to help them achieve their goals in podcasting and other things. I understand you also are the author of a #1 best-selling book.
Yeah, Finding Your Voice was a phenomenal thing for us. That actually is where I chronicle a little bit of my story. I won't go into the details here, but I had a near-death experience when I was 5. I was actually thrown into a coma, and it involved basically a 30-foot fall, a speeding train, a bridge out in the middle of the Texas Hill Country, and massive blood loss. And through divine and medical heroic efforts, I was able to come out of my coma, and in 3 weeks' time, spend an additional 3 weeks in the hospital. And then as I woke up from my coma at age 6, I was able to, move forward and really learn some things that I didn't know how to do anymore. To begin the rehabilitation and the recovery process, to also find my own voice in that process, which is exactly what I did. And yeah, Finding Your Voice book kind of gives that story. Plus, it talks about some of the success stories and the steps that people took, or have taken rather, that I've worked with to help them really get in touch with who they are at a deep level, so that they can move forward with their business goals, with their content creation goals, podcast goals.
Okay. Now, as you were growing and getting into all of this and learning, you've become a great coach and a mentor and things. But when you were starting out, what was some of the best advice that you ever received?
Yeah, boy, that is a good question. Let me think about that for a minute. Some of the best advice that I was ever received is just to not quit. And I mean, that doesn't sound glamorous or sexy, or, sounds very simple, but that's what I heard. Just don't quit. Mm-hmm. Don't quit. It kind of reminds me, and it brings tears to my eyes when I think back to a fantastic movie that I saw called Facing the Giants. Mm-hmm. You ever seen that movie?
I can't recall seeing it. I may have, but it doesn't ring a bell. So
I interviewed the lead actress on my podcast. Her name's Shannon Fields. But anyways, the movie was about a football coach and how he was bringing his team back from a dismal whatever place to first place, and one of the football players was doing the bear crawl. You know what the bear crawl is? Looks just like across the football field. But the coach had him do it blindfolded. Uh-huh. And the reason the coach had him do it blindfolded is because he didn't want that guy to give up just because he reached, whatever, the 10-yard line, the 50-yard line, and so forth and so on. He wanted the absolute best from that guy. Mm-hmm. And he also didn't want that guy limited, or to limit himself by, well, I've got this far, this is far enough. Mm-hmm. See, the coach wanted 100% full participation. And that's what we need as goal setters and getters, 100% full participation. So there was a dramatic scene in that movie when the coach is opposite this guy, blindfolded on all fours, and he's just, the coach is walking backwards as in a bear crawl, just screaming at this player, "Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit." And you know what? The player collapsed at the end in complete exhaustion. But as the coach pulled off the player's blindfold, and this is when the goosebumps and the shivers start, the player actually had made it from one end zone to the other end zone.
Wow.
100 yards just by hearing in his ears. Don't quit. Don't quit. And that's the advice that I, again, not sexy, not glamorous, but that's the advice that I live by.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. And the name of that movie again?
Facing the Giants.
Facing the Giants. Okay, I'll have that on our show notes, folks. goalgettingpodcast.com/Joel, and you'll be able to check out that movie, Facing the Giants. I appreciate that. That's very important. And, again, consistent persistence. Do not quit. I hear that a lot, and that's very important. It kind of goes a lot to, you mentioned earlier, results only, no excuses. And, it's one of our mottos in the mastermind group that you talk about. And, you are a great mentor and do have a mastermind group that I belong to, and I appreciate you opening that up to me. Napoleon Hill is, famous with talking about masterminds being very important in a person's life and success. And, tell us a little bit about your mastermind or your mentoring concepts and philosophies with the results only, no excuses.
Well, sure. I can appreciate this. And, Tony, I want to respect your time, and I want to respect your audience's time. And I don't want to give a commercial for the ReLaunch Elite Mastermind. And we're having a blast in that. But I want to give relevant information that's applicable to whomever you hang with. If you're a member of my group, that's great. If you're a member of your prayer circle, that's great. Or if you're a member of a mastermind group somewhere else, or just a bunch of friends, that's great too. But this applies to everyone. And really, the very first value, and you probably remember me talking about this, Tony, is about personal accountability. And personal accountability is the number one needle mover that you'll find.
Yep.
And while you personally, Tony, are a member of my group, and we love you there, and we're there to support you and to clap our hands and to cheer you on to victory. And it's great when you're accountable to me as your mentor. It's great when you're accountable to the group as your fellow elites. But the real needle mover, and you've already figured this out, is when you're accountable to yourself. And that's the game changer.
Right.
And that's one of the very first values that I talk about with people in the very initial stages. Because when you decide to be personally accountable, not relying on this guy or that guy or this group or that group, well, then that's all you have to work with, the guy in the mirror. And when you come to terms with that, that makes all the difference in the world. So personal accountability is huge. And as you've seen with this podcast, it will move everything quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. Now, I definitely believe in the accountability, both personal, and getting an accountability partner, somebody to help you stay on your goals and stay focused. So, having a good mentor or mastermind group or an accountability partner is helpful. But like you say, it really is about personal accountability, holding yourself accountable.
And I think that's where some people with the best of intentions sometimes miss, not because they're trying to, but again, best of intentions is because sometimes people can rely on other people.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's their problem that you're not where you need to be.
Right.
And that's a recipe for a lot of frustration.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I
can
agree with that.
So personal accountability. And again, Tony, I'm preaching to myself here. And when I brought that up to you, I wasn't telling you anything that you didn't know. I was just gently reminding you. Okay, maybe not so gently, but I was reminding you of something that, for whatever reason, may not have been on the top of your mind at that point.
Right. Yeah. And again, I don't mind the not so gentle reminders. Big guys, sometimes it takes a little nudge there that knocks me on my tail. So for me, that's a good way to handle it. So we don't have any problems with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that we talk about in goal setting is, developing habits, and sometimes habits can hinder a person or help them achieve a goal. And do you have any particular habits that you follow that that you contribute to your success?
I do, and I really appreciate you kind of giving me an opportunity to talk about them. Yeah, we have what we like to call ReLaunch rituals or routines, if you will. And basically what those are those habits that you can participate in and day out that will set you up for success. Now, you might be asking yourself, like a lot of people do, okay, what are rituals? What are routines? And which are the ones that are going to help me? Well, you're going to need to kind of find that out for yourself because everyone's different and we don't live in a cookie cutter world. But by studying some of the resources like this podcast, for instance, other video or other podcasts or video training materials that can help you get schooled in, okay, well, what routines or rituals are going to help me? Also, by linking arms with other people and getting involved in some ReLaunch relationships, that's going to help you learn different routines and rituals that are going to help you out. Like, hey, well, what did you do every morning to set yourself up for success? Mm-hmm. You can learn that stuff through reading books like Compound Effect. You might want to include that in the show notes, or Eat That Frog. You might want to include that in the show notes as well. Book that I just finished reading is called Edgy Conversation by Edgy Conversations with an S by Dan Waldschmidt, who's an upcoming guest on my show. You might want to include that as well. But you asked me about habits. Yeah, I do the best I can, Tony, to get up every morning to spend that quiet time. Everyone's schedules are different. For some people it might be 10 minutes, for other people it might be 15, for some it might be 30 or more.
Right.
But spending that time to get grounded and to know what I need to focus on. So I'm not just being busy, but I'm doing work that matters.
Mm-hmm.
The number one habit that I do participate in is working out. By far, that's a business function.
Right. Yeah.
For me, that's a business function. Several reasons. Number one, it opens up doors of creativity. Mm-hmm. I always come home with more than I left with.
Right.
And not only that, but it's also a social aspect for me. Because when I go to work out, I'm surrounded by other entrepreneurs.
Right. Other entrepreneurs and like-minded people that have the same or similar goals to working out. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Excellent.
Well, similar goals in general, because, most entrepreneurs, they want to make a bigger difference, like the people that listen to this show, and they want to meet their needs financially and other ways. So.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, let's see. Do you, I don't want to go too much past your time. I know you're going to go house hunting here in a little while. You recently sold your house. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I want to make sure I don't overstep your time there. What are some of the top 3 goals that you have this year, or at least one of your top goals that you're working on this year?
Okay, sure. The next 90 days, I want to help my wife launch her podcast, Dentist Happy Hour.
Dentist Happy Hour.
Yes, and that's a 90-day goal.
Okay.
Aside from that, what we're working on right now, Tony, is so exciting. I almost can't sleep because of it. And that is, we are developing a turnkey, done for you type service for podcasters. Uh-huh. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times podcasters want to create their content and then be done. And we're going to create that situation.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to create some systems where we can get quick editing, quick quick show notes,
Mm-hmm.
quick tagging, with the ID3 tags
Right.
and all that. And then also setting up a marketing system. So
that's big because that's something that most podcasters forget to do or don't have the time or the experience in marketing and
I think
using
that's
social media and stuff. So
exactly. So we want to set that up as well. Plus, we want to have that scheduling system built in,
mm-hmm.
so that we're helping people get guests, because I think that's a big struggle for a lot of people.
Right.
Who do I get? How do I get them? How do I pitch and things of that nature? So we're going to take care of all that. Plus, we want to develop an idea that'll take us from podcast to book.
Uh-huh.
And by that, I mean, you create the podcast content and then we'll get it transferred into book form, by transcribing the interviews
mm-hmm.
and then tweaking them when necessary. So it makes for good reading.
Excellent. No, that's great. I'm looking forward to hearing that as a podcaster. And, one of the things that, or one of the goals that I have of, having guests on the show, it wasn't my initial plan for the Goal Getting podcast, but I wanted to bring on people that can help our audience that are working on specific goals or, goals in certain areas to hear and, get a vision from other people that are in similar successful areas that have achieved their goals and can share those particular items. Your podcast is an excellent tool for that. You are an excellent mentor and teacher for that, especially for people who want to be known in their niche, people who want to become book authors, get out there, and also for podcasters and and just good goals in general and achieving those goals. You've got some great tips and great mentoring, and I want to thank you for sharing those on the show today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure being here, Tony. Again, we're just so excited that you're in Elite and you're making things happen with this show and with your business, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, Joel. I appreciate it. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you one last thing. What is parting words of wisdom that you might have for people who are trying to achieve their goals? Do you have something you can share? Just some. Again, we asked you what the best advice you received was. Can you share, parting words of wisdom for our guest on people who are trying to achieve their goals?
I certainly can. And it's going to be advice that you're very familiar with, Tony. And thank you for asking. I would suggest that people create one great goal, and they put it in a time frame of 90 days. And a lot of programs talk about setting multiple goals for multiple areas of your life. And while I think that's delivered with the best of intentions and that logically it makes sense, you and I both live in the real world. And what that can lead up to possibly is a lot of frustration
mm-hmm.
and a realization that, my gosh, I can't do all of this at once. And that's the point.
Right.
You can't. Nobody can.
It does make that tough. So, focusing on that one great goal in that 90-day period is definitely, it's helping me. And, I have one of those right now that I'm working with thanks to you. So we do appreciate that.
So, being able to be laser focused and using a reasonable amount of time, 90 days seems to work wonders. That's one quarter. And being able to knock something out of the park within 90 days. 30 days is generally too short of a period of time. And 1 year can be intimidating for a lot of people. But 90 days seems to work. And then once you have that one great goal, then set yourself 7-day goals. That means one goal per week that is related to your longer term goal. So basically what you're doing is every week up to 90 days, you're taking a step toward reaching where you want to reach, reaching where you want to be.
Yep, exactly. And good. That's great advice, Joel. I appreciate that. again, 7-day goals to work towards your one big goal in 90 days. And
Yes.
that will keep you focused on what you're trying to do. It'll keep you where you can easily monitor and, keep track of that and measure what you're doing and, sign off. And when you do achieve those goals within those 7-day periods, raise a cheer and support and, reward yourself with, a little patting on your own back, because we need to reward ourselves when we achieve our goals.
Absolutely. And gosh, you can tweet Tony, when you achieve a goal. You can send Tony a tweet. You can send me a tweet. My Twitter handle is @JoelBoggess, and I will cheer you on. And as I know Tony will as well.
Exactly. And Joel, you mentioned your Twitter handle @JoelBoggess. Is there any other ways people can get in touch with you? We'll put those on the show notes as well, so
Sure.
they can easily get in touch with you.
Sure. Appreciate that, Tony. Two websites real quick. ReLaunchShow.com. Again, ReLaunchShow.com is the main website. That's where you'll find all of our podcasts and our complimentary training. And then ReLaunchShow.com/resources. Again, ReLaunchShow.com/resources are where you'll find all of the online tools that Pei and I have either used or are currently using in the online world and in our online business. So those will be very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Again, those will be on the show notes, folks. You'll be able to get to those. RelaunchShow.com, Joel's Twitter handle @JoelBoggess, and RelaunchShow.com/resources will make those easy links for you to get to on the show notes. And Joel, I do appreciate your time today. I thank you for coming on our show. I know our listeners are going to get a lot of good tips and advice. And folks, if you reach out to Joel, if you have any questions, go to our show notes and leave a comment. Make sure Joel gets those, and he can then respond to your comments on the website at goalgettingpodcast.com. Have a great day, folks, and a great week, and we'll see you next week. Goal Getters, I hope you enjoyed that show with Joel Boggess. He's a great guy. Got some great information. If you learned something here, hopefully you'll leave a comment for him on our show notes in the comment section at goalgettingpodcast.com/Joel, Joel. And if you want to, like I said, speak with Joel or talk with him, you can reach him on some of the connections that we put on our show notes page. Now, for those of you who are listeners to the Goal Getting podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, you can look up one of the books that Joel recommended on Audible, and if you like to listen to your books on Audible like you do your podcasts, you can go out and get that free audiobook download with your free 30-day trial and give that an opportunity to try their service and see how you like it. So to download your free audiobook today, you can go to goalgettingbook.com. Again, that's goalgettingbook.com for your free audiobook. So again, thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something from Joel. I know I continue to do that every single day when I chat with Joel. And we want you to get your goals that you set and learn how you can overcome obstacles and change the negative programming you have in your subconscious mind, and we hope to help you with that. So thank you again for listening to Goal Getting Podcast. We'll see you next week. I'd like to thank my good friend Mark Sensinger from marksensinger.com. Mark created Baccarat, the music you just heard, for the Goal Getting podcast, and I really want to thank Mark for that. If you need any type of music, Mark is an excellent composer. He's done some things for Boston Pops, done a few things for other orchestras in the New England area. Go visit marksensinger.com and check out some of the great work that he's done. And he can do it for you. He can provide you with music for a bar mitzvah, bachelorette party, or your own wedding tune. You know, that would be a wonderful thing to have your own wedding composition created by an artist like Mark Sensinger at marksensinger.com. So Mark's a good friend. check him out. Go visit him and his webpage and see if he can write something for you like he did for us at Goal Getting Podcast with that great piece, Baccarat.